The House will come to order. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. This is the Garofalo motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred in and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 1937, an act relating to state government. The message is signed by Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. The report is addressed to the Honorable Michelle L. Fischbach, President of the Senate, the Honorable Kurt L. Doudt, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferees for Senate File 1937, report that we have agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend it as follows. The Conference Committee report is signed by 4 of the 5 conferees on behalf of the Senate and 4 of the 5 conferees on the part of the House. Garofalo moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 1937 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the author, Chairman Garofalo from Dakota.
Mr. Speaker, that is my motion.
Any discussion? Any discussion? The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there's a few things about this particular bill and that I could have spoken to. I know there are a good number of people on the DFL side that wanted to have a few words about such a wonderful piece of legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll sit down. I'd like to make a couple of suggestions about who you call on so that Mr. Garofalo has an opportunity to respond to a veto missile that he's sending off. But I know Representative Clark had a few comments that she wanted to speak to, and I'll leave it at that.
Any further discussion? Lady from Hennepin, Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I would like to comment on a couple of things, particularly dealing with housing. One of the things that the bill that comes back to us that's good is to restore the funding to the challenge program. So we now have in this bill that came from the Conference Committee funding for the full amount that the governor recommended, about $23 million for both over 2 years. So that's a good change. I'd like to also note that the program that deals with workforce development that was originally indeed got moved over to the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. That's against their recommendations, so that's one thing that has not changed. It's still funded, and that's good, but it's now at Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, who has less experience working with this than does DEED, where it was working right along with some of the job creation issues. One of the issues that's really a loss and continues to be a loss is the failure to put into the Conference Committee report the funding for the governor's initiatives on highly mobile students. The House had funded a part of that, and that was a really good thing in Representative Garofalo's bill, but the bill that comes back has 0 funding for the governor's highly mobile students and for homeownership capacity building. Let me just mention what this highly mobile students issue was about and why it's such a shame that it's not in here. This is the governor's 3rd year of paying attention to the fact that we know that one of the most serious problems for children to succeed in school is their lack of housing, the issue of being homeless. Representative Dabney brought to my attention that there was an institute study at the University of Minnesota Institute of Child Development, where they actually studied this real specifically and documented that homelessness is the #1 challenge to children learning in schools. So there are about 9,000 Minnesota children who are in this homeless or highly mobile category, and that is not funded in this Conference Committee. That's a big loss, and we failed to do what the governor's leadership had suggested we do with that. There's a concern about the way we deal with MHFA, the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency's operating budget. Minnesota Housing Finance Agency is one of those agencies that doesn't take appropriations from us to do their administration. They don't rely on us for that. That's their own funding. And yet, in this conference committee report, we have caps that are put on their operating budget and their staffing levels. Again, no relationship to any funding that comes from us. And part of the reason they object to that is that they feel that they work well with the private sector and that when they need to, they can respond more quickly when they have opportunities to change their administration or hire other people. So that's a loss for them. One of the things that was particularly important to me that is not in this bill, and again, it was in Representative Garofalo's bill, and that was the issue of dealing with our children who are lead poisoned. We had put in the housing bill, and Representative Garofalo supported the fact that we were trying to put a priority on helping those property owners, landlords, and their renters who had children who are being exposed to toxic lead in their home. We made it a priority for the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency to spend some of their rehabilitation dollars. That got taken out, and that's a real loss. There's 700 Minnesota kids who are permanently damaged, 700 every year in Minnesota by childhood lead poisoning, and so that priority is gone too. So, Mr. Chairman, we lost some things in the bill that were pretty important, and I guess I'll leave it at that and just say these are things that could be corrected, hopefully, in a future funding bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative Garofalo. This conference committee report takes us back to 1986 when President Ronald Reagan gutted all the research money for renewable energy and took the solar panels off the White House roof. This bill couldn't be more backward. The bill sabotages the new electric solar energy in Minnesota, and with it, all those good-paying jobs in solar installation. That's not all that's bad with this bill, but I'm going to start with solar. This bill gets rid of Made in Minnesota that launched the Minnesota solar industry and 495 jobs. It also gets rid of the Renewable Development Fund that was created in part as part of the Prairie Island Settlement to promote renewable energy. And that is exactly what the Renewable Energy Fund did. So rather than spending the RDF dollars on promoting renewable energy, this Republican bill first reduces the amount of money going into the fund, even though the casks are not leaving Prairie Island. They're staying the same place they always were and probably will for generations. Then the bill puts money into a newly created fund with entirely different priorities. And it earmarks some major earmarks in this bill. One says that if XL buys out or terminates its lease with the turkey litter to electricity plant in Benson, it'll give $20 million to Benson, to the city of Benson. And from what we hear in the halls, though you may want to correct me, is that it's to help build a cheese plant. There's another earmark that takes $34 million. So that earmarks eat up the money in the bill. Minnesotans spend billions, and that's with a B, of dollars per year on electricity imported from other states and Canada. At stake in the Republican energy bill are dollars that could stay in Minnesota and create jobs in Minnesota, or dollars that we will continue to send to other states to create jobs and wealth in other states. So to the extent that Minnesota could create jobs with our abundant wind and our abundant sun, more dollars will stay in Minnesota, circulate in Minnesota, and create jobs in Minnesota. That, of course, would be good for Minnesota's economy, but not good for big oil and big coal that are dependent on Minnesota dollars leaving Minnesota. Sabotaging solar is not the only thing that's wrong with this bill. I'm going to just bring up a couple of others, but I don't see anything particularly good in the energy section. So anything I'm not speaking about doesn't mean it's not good, because it's not. But I'm only going to bring up a couple others. So the bill asserts control, has the legislature assert control over the Volkswagen settlement, which means that we're not going to get the money, because the trust fund clearly, or the trust that is the legal guide here, clearly says that the governor needs to certify, sign his name, certify that his agency, and in this case, the Pollution Control Agency, has binding legal authorities to spend the money. And of course, if the governor can't sign that certification because the legislature has asserted the authority, we're not going to get the money. There's another provision I want to highlight, and that's the one that takes away rights and opportunities for Minnesotans. There's a provision in the bill that says certificates of need are no longer required for big oil pipelines, big solar, big wind, renewable replacement pipelines. What the certificate of need does by the starting gate, it lets neighbors know of the proposal for a big facility. This bill takes that right away from neighbors. It takes away the right of neighbors to comment or question the proposal that's out there. And eliminating certificate of need is especially troublesome where, like in the case of a pipeline, the energy facility creating the pipeline has a right of eminent domain. And there's the final thing that you need to look at. We're dealing with a lot of treaty rights here, totally ignoring treaty rights. There's a provision in the bill that takes away the rights and opportunities of those who get their electricity from small co-ops and small municipals, who now, consumers now have the right to have help with energy efficiency, reducing their electric bill. That's being taken away in this bill. Big oil, big coal have just got to love this bill. They are dependent on the dollars leaving the state and creating wealth and jobs in other states. But this part of the bill is not good for Minnesotan, and the right vote for Minnesota is a no vote.
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to talk a little bit more about the repeal or the Renewal Development Fund. So it's my understanding this is going to eliminate the Renewable Development Fund and transfer that money to a Clean Energy Advancement Fund, but that the projects that it could finance may or may not have anything to do with renewable energy. And I think that Representative Garofalo would argue otherwise, but I think he can't dispute that it's clearly not consistent with the original intent of the law that was passed in 1999, the law authorizing dry cask storage at the Prairie Island nuclear generating plant that established the Renewable Development Fund in the first place. And you have a letter here from the community stating that what's forgotten in this bill is the RDF's origins. The fund was created as a condition of storing spent nuclear fuel and dry gas at the plant, and that the objective was to reduce the state's dependence on nuclear energy by identifying and funding projects that will develop newer emerging renewable energy resources. And there may be some valid arguments that it needs to be updated. It may be outdated as far as technology. But that, again, what we do here is we bring stakeholders together and we figure out a way to make the law better. But this basically creates a slush fund. And so you ask, why do we need a renewable development fund? Most, really, we could spend hours talking about the role of government and whether, the market and whether tax credits or loans and grants, or whether this type of renewal fund is the best way to approach this issue. But really, the requirement that this must somehow, the projects must benefit ratepayers is something that it really goes against you couldn't go more extreme to violate the original intent. And the community sits 600 yards from these casts. And at the time that this issue was there was a debated protest and the deal made, and what existed then exists now, and that is that the cost of non-renewable energy, it does not take into consideration the price. It does not capture the environmental and social costs of that non-renewable energy. And so you need financing mechanisms, you need government to intervene. And I'm thinking back during that testimony, my father came here to testify before a committee, and he talked about environmental racism and how, building the nuclear plant 600 yards from the community was something that was frequently done on similar actions on many reservations, that it was environmental racism. And so you can think at that time, the one way that they could live with it was that we reduce our dependence, but also that we would develop new technologies. And so if you look at, I know that people at Prairie Island were concerned at other Indian tribes. And so if you look where my father was from Pine Ridge, where 40% of the households live without electricity. That exists in 1999, that exists today. And because they live off the grid. And so having technologies where you could use solar panels, where you could use lithium batteries and storage is something, I think that was something they were thinking about, was that how do we bring non-renewable to those that have no reliable, don't have the option of having renewable energy resources, who cannot go out and buy a Tesla. And we lived on many reservations, and one was Navajo. And if you know a little bit about Navajo, they have a massive generating facility that pumps. It's a power plant fueled by coal. It pumps 16 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere each year and consumes 15 tons of coal per minute. Yet the Navajo Nation, the people, 37% of them do not have electricity. And those are the issues that were being discussed in 1999. So this creating a slush fund for, and jobs, we all want to create jobs. We want to do it in a responsible way. We want to do it in a way that sustainable, takes advantage of clean energy, creates green jobs, creates jobs that require education and technology that are high paying. And so this is a very short-sighted bill. And so the sort of Minnesota first, the jobs first at any cost, it does not take into consideration the price. And the fact that do we have a responsibility for people who do not, in this country, who do not have access to electricity, who are using fossil fuels to heat their homes, who have high rates of asthma? Do we have any responsibility? And I think that the intent of this Renewable Development Fund was that we wanted to do something in the public interest to benefit people who lack resources, who have been left out. I mean, what better example of somebody left out when you have 40% of the Navajo Nation who doesn't even live next to the grid?
The gentleman from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak just on a provision that was not included in the bill. And I do want to start out by saying not the fault of Representative Garofalo. This is a problem that we have on the Senate side. But it has to do with internet privacy, members. And this is legislation that passed this House unanimously. It passed the Senate with only one no vote. And nonetheless, it did not find its way into this bill. And I think that that is frustrating and troublesome. The member who voted no in the other body said today he's not going to allow it to proceed forward. I think we should speak with a very strong unified voice in saying that that should not be the case. The fact of the matter is we are living in an economy right now that is increasingly dominated by a very few companies who control our information. And we've talked, a century ago, we talked about monopolies of natural resources and how bad that was for our country, how bad it was for our democracy and for our economy, for small businesses in many, many ways. And we acted as a country to do something about that. We are facing the same thing right now, but it just has to do with the information economy that is increasingly dominated by companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook and some of the internet service providers like Comcast and AT&T, and we need to act about this. And I'm very proud of this legislature that when the Congress took a step backwards on internet privacy about a month ago, this legislator promptly acted and reacted to protect the interests of Minnesotans and defend the interests of Minnesotans. And it's really a fairly simple thing that we're asking for. First, that people should have the power to exercise the right to explicitly opt in to having their information shared or sold. It's very common sense. Under Minnesota law today, the company can decide to sell or share your information without telling you unless you actually opt in. That doesn't make sense, opt out. Tell them you don't want that to happen. I think, and what our bill provided and what we should do is say that the company has to get your permission before they act. That seems pretty basic to me. And the second thing is, people shouldn't lose their right to participate in the modern economy, shouldn't lose their right to get on the internet if they opt out of having their private personal information shared or sold by that company. That's all we're asking for with these provisions. Again, it passed this legislature 200 votes yes to 1 vote no. In those circumstances, there is simply no way that this type of language should be left out of the bill. And so when this bill comes back after the governor's veto, I hope that we can include this language and we get to a place in time and a point where we are actually going to be acting as a state, as the representatives of the people of Minnesota, to make sure that people's personal information is protected and act in common sense defense of all of our constituents.
The lady from Ramsey, Representative Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to rise to talk a little bit about this bill and the impact that it has on the equity dollars that this body in the 26th legislative session focused on. And at that time, it was a focus on improving the economic opportunities for Minnesotans with barriers to employment, including people of color, women, youth, people with disabilities, and or veterans in Minnesota. I think this bill goes back on Minnesota's promise to fix racial economic disparities. It also takes away $4.5 million that it had dedicated last semester. Last year, the legislature passed Governor's Dayton Equity Initiative to combat racial economic disparities. Now we have the Republicans who are cutting and shifting monies away from these efforts that ensure opportunities for all Minnesotans. The organizations that receive these appropriations have been highly successful in achieving the objectives that these appropriations to increase workforce, business, and economic development opportunities in Minnesota's most vulnerable communities throughout the state of Minnesota. For example, Metropolitan Economic Development, which we will shorten that to mean MEDA, has assisted over 160 minority-owned businesses. Neighborhood Development Center was able to assist 349 minority-owned businesses. I think there's a concern here that the current proposal being put forward by the House and the Senate Committee on Jobs and Economic Development, Commerce and Energy would stop the progress in its tracks. So as you know, in 2016, the Minnesota State Demographer Center issued a report in January of 2016. And it was entitled, The Economic Status of Minnesotans. The report disaggregated 17 of the largest cultural groups in Minnesota. It should come at no surprise that anyone on this committee that in that report, it stated that 3 in 4 in 10 African Indians and Black residents live below the federal poverty threshold. 15% or more of Somali, African American, Liberian, Ethiopian, Ojibwe, ages 16 to 64 are unemployed. And not because they want to be unemployed, they are looking for jobs. They're looking for access to training and opportunity. The median family income for African Americans, Ojibwe, Hmong, Mexicans, and Filipino is less than $40,000 per year. In Minnesota, we have a problem. And unless we do something about it, it's going to get worse, not better. And as our cultural community are finding their ways into the labor force, unless we educate, train, and make our cultural communities work-ready, businesses will leave Minnesota. This is not my thought, this is the thought of many. And our economy will suffer. The 2016 equity funding was a step in the right direction that is a beginning to achieve the results. And so, member, often in this body, over the last couple of sessions, we've heard many from the rural community state that what we're doing in St. Paul is not working for the rural community. We have heard the rural community say what we're doing here is not what we need to help us move forward. What the rural community has said is that we're being left out this process. And I would agree and say that what they are saying is exactly what many communities of color is saying, that what we're doing in this body is not working for us, that we've been left out this process. And so many of the dollars that we invested in 2016 came from communities who are doing transformational work. They're training people, they're work ready, they're creating possibilities. And we take those dollars away that comes from the community. We decide that we know best what is working best for them. We take a lot of those direct appropriations from many of those communities that got the dollars in 2017 that was in the budget to go into 2018 and 19. Because if we think that we can give people, companies, organizations, one-time dollars, it's going to have an impact on the huge issues that are impacting our community, you're wrong. It takes more than one-time appropriations to help organizations who have been overburdened with the issues that are impacting our communities that I discussed when I first opened this statement. Research and data tell us if we're going to work to close the disparities within our state, whether it's in our educational system or in jobs and workforce, we have to see those appropriations for at least 2 to 3 years to begin to have an impact. And my hope is that in this body, we want to have an impact. We don't want to just throw dollars away. And when we don't invest and allow the people who have been impacted by systems who's on the ground doing the work to say, this is the way that we need to do it, and begin to decide in this body who are not a part of those communities, who's not in those communities, make those decisions for them, then we get the disparities that we see. I want us to help here. And there are families who want to be self-sufficient. They want to take care of themselves. But there are barriers in place where these dollars in 2016 was doing the work. You see the results. I named it. We talked about you heard it. And now we want to pull the rug from up under them. So my hope that as we go back into conference committee, that the cries that you have been hearing from the rural communities that are real, they're so real in our community too, is let the community and community organizations, private sector, all collectively to be a part of the solution and listen to them. Invest in them. Because when you invest in people being a part of the solution for their own community, you're going to yield some good results here. You would yield some good results. So let's take this back. You know, we can do better. There's no reason that we, with a $1.65 billion surplus, that we are cutting dollars for these communities. There's no reason that we need to be doing that. So my hope, I have confidence in Representative Garofalo to make this better, to look at in a way to allow communities to be a part of helping that. Because when we strengthen these communities, when we enhance these communities, we are enhancing the state of Minnesota. So I look forward to a better bill. Thank you.
The gentleman from Hennepin, Representative Davnie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, as we walk through the proposed jobs conference report and look at different aspects, I take that jobs part very seriously and look outside this chamber, outside this building to the people of Minnesota. And we have to recognize the challenges that many Minnesotans face in achieving and then remaining in the middle class. Our unemployment rate is significantly below the national average here in Minnesota. 3.8% last month. That's not luck, that's hard work. It's hard work of Minnesota employers, it's the hard work of Minnesota employees, it's the hard work of the state. to make that happen. But while that rate is lower than the national average, we still have mass layoffs occurring as companies shift, as they're bought up by other companies, as changes in direction are made. And these changes go across different sectors. In just the last few months, G&K Services out in Minnetonka, just a few weeks ago, announced over 230 people laid off. General Mills and Kellogg, something's going on in the cereal world. Members, think about that over your breakfast in the morning, have both announced mass layoffs. Medica, in our ever-changing healthcare industry, both Medica and Blue Cross Blue Shield have announced layoffs. Seagate Technology, very different than some of the work that's being done elsewhere in these mass layoffs, but again, a company that's laying off significant numbers of Minnesotans. And when these mass layoffs occur, the state should be stepping up to giving those employees, those Minnesotans so affected, help in getting a hand up. Our dislocated worker program, however, takes a $20 million hit, a $20 million cut over its projections, its base level of funding in this bill. $20 million less to help out Minnesotans when they most need to upgrade their resume, to upgrade their skills, to reposition themselves into our dynamic economy. If this is a jobs bill, it needs to do better for Minnesotans who find themselves, through no fault of their own, out of a job. I'd ask for a no vote. Thank you.
The lady from Dakota, Representative May Quaid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I also want to speak a little bit to the jobs piece of our jobs and energy bill. In Minnesota, we have vocational rehabilitation services. These are services that help Minnesotans with disabilities get job counseling and get a job and job placement. They work with employers. And in 2014, the federal government signed an unfunded mandate that kind of changed how we do VRS in Minnesota. And it prioritizes people with the most severe disabilities first. That's good. That's very, very good. But we have 4 categories in VRS for people with disabilities. Categories 2 through 4 have a 1,200 member waiting list. 2 through 4 are closed. They don't even function right now. Category 1, if we do not fund it with more funding as proposed by the governor, will be closed in fall of this year. That's 5,800 Minnesotans with disabilities who will be kept on a waiting list, who want jobs, who want career counseling and career advice, want to seek placement in companies. We have a workforce shortage in Minnesota, and we have workers who desire to get into jobs. And by not funding this $7 million to support VRS, we are throwing tens of thousands of Minnesotans with disability into the economic sidelines. And that is just one of the reasons why I am just such a no on this veto missile. When we send this back, and we need to send this back, we need to be thinking about the workforce shortage we have here in Minnesota, the 7,000 Minnesotans with disabilities who want jobs, and the folks who are doing the work, sometimes double time now, to get those folks into jobs. And I want to say last that these populations are not shrinking, they're growing. The populations of Minnesotans with disability is growing, and in fact, their unemployment rate is 10 times higher than the rate of the state. In fact, people with disabilities, their unemployment rate is higher now than it was when the ADA was passed. Folks, we've got to do better than this. This jobs bill should be helping people get into jobs. So I'm a no vote on this, and I ask that when we send this back, that $7 million request, that small request, to make sure that we get Minnesotans with disabilities is funded. Thank you.
The gentleman from Dakota, Chairman Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd request a roll call on the adoption of the report.
Roll call. Having been requested are the 15 hands. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The gentleman from Dakota, Chairman Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, just to address a couple of comments from members on the other side of the aisle, and then I'll do a quick overview of the bill. First of all, Representative Davney and Mahoney both alluded to the fact that there is a higher amount of money being spent on the Workforce Development Fund when this came out of the House. Initially, it was $800,000 was the approximate amount that we are offering in direct appropriations. That did go up to $19 million. I do want to highlight that both Representative Mahoney and Davney are right on those accounts, and I'm hoping that as we move forward in the process, we do something to address their concerns that they brought forward. The next point is Representative Allen, the letter you passed out on the House floor, I want to point it to you that this is dated January 17th. This is on a different piece of legislation. As far as I know, each of the concerns that have been brought forward by the Prairie Island community have been addressed in pages 164 through 167 of the bill. If I am mistaken about that, if there's been a miscommunication, please let me know. And I would direct those comments to you as well as to any members of the Prairie Island community. If there was something we missed in the reform language of 164 to 167 on the pages of this bill, again, that's my understanding that we have addressed that. In the bill, the amount of broadband is being doubled to $15 million. Yay. The target for this is $8.7 million above base. As you go through the bill, I would encourage members, when you look at the spreadsheet, please do not focus on just page 2 of the spreadsheet to see whether items are funded. In addition, because of the shifts to the Workforce Development Fund, if you look at page 6 and the top of page 7, many of those items are funded in the Workforce Development Fund going forward. Representative West's Helmets to Hard Hats program, where we have those members who are in the military coming back. It's a perfect recruitment program to get these individuals focused in the heavy industry and the construction trades. Other states are using this as a recruitment tool. Huge win for the state of Minnesota. It's in this bill. Representative Poppy's bill for Greater Minnesota Community Design Pilot is also in the bill. Representative Fabian's bill for DigiKey, what is going to be a multi-decade regional economic driver for Northwest Minnesota. The incentives for that are in the bill. Representative Bar R, her bill for the Intercan project in Inver Grove Heights, $200 million of private sector investment to convert waste to energy. Again, not only cleaner energy, but also cheaper energy. Her provision is in the bill. In addition, Representative Thiessen's funding for the Center for Rural Policy and Development, the increase in that funding, as well as future revenue streams for the setup of the endowment, that is in the bill. Representative West, you're in the bill again. The $1.5 million for the Summit Academy OIC to make sure that we're getting those individuals trained and into our workforce. With the unemployment rates we have now, we can't afford to have people on the bench. Representative Mahoney's contaminated site cleanup provisions are in the bill. There's increased funding for extended employment in the bill. In addition, Representative Erickson has worked with us on extending and expanding the Lake Mille Lacs Economic Relief Program for the problems that are having up there as a result of government regulation. Representative Rarick's provision for job training grants, so that instead of having job training being run through institutions or through big bodies, these are individual grants to small-scale employers, particularly in Greater Minnesota, so that when they need training, they can use this as sort of a quasi-apprenticeship program at the low level. In addition, Representative News program for Twin Cities Rise, additional funding for that, particularly the successes they've had about as their aging workforce retires, the baby boomers retire, providing additional funds to train in a new class of workers to be working on the transit fleet in our communities. Representative Vogel's Financial Services Inclusion Program as well is in the bill. And of course, on the nice side is that we're reducing the cost for things. There are licensing fee reductions for revenue into the construction code licensing division that are included in this bill. Before I move on to the energy provisions, I do want to ask Representative Wagenius to yield to a couple of questions.
She will yield. The gentleman from Dakota, Chairman Garofalo.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Wagenius, earlier you voiced some concerns with the funding in this bill for the Laurentian program to have them convert to cleaner and cheaper energy, as well as to, so that's $34 million. You are the DFL lead on energy for your caucus. Is that the DFL position on this issue? Is there opposite that the DFL is opposed to that?
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
We're DFLers. That should answer it.
The gentleman from Dakota, Chairman Garofalo.
Well, Mr. Speaker and Representative Wagenius, I'll ask the question again if you'll yield again.
She will yield. The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
The reason why is that in private and public negotiations, we are getting two stories from different members of the DFL. We are being told by some DFLers this package of reforms has been agreed to. We negotiated this in advance of the conference committee being reported, and that there is bipartisan agreement on it. Yet publicly and in some private meetings, we're hearing what you said today, that there is opposition to this provision. And it makes it very difficult for this side of the aisle to negotiate with that side of the aisle when there are divergent positions on whether this is a settled matter or not. So I would again ask that question if that is the DFL position on this issue or not.
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
As far as I know, there's no DFL position on that, and have not been a party to any of these negotiations. I think the issue I was bringing up, and the one we need to address, is that the money that you are negotiating about, apparently, not with me, but apparently with someone, is RDF money that is specifically targeted for renewable energy, to promote it, to do research about it, those kinds of things. So I think the question, or one of the questions I would have is this an appropriate use of that money? And from my point of view, it is not.
John from Dakota, Chairman Garofalo.
Well, Mr. Speaker and members, just to be clear and for the record, there have been, I have not been negotiating with one person in the DFL on this. There's been a broad array of stakeholders in the House and in the Senate, legislators as well as groups outside, and we have reached a negotiated agreement which has a package of what is called the Sea Leaf reforms. Now, I would tell you this is not my language. I've worked with Senator Bach and Senator Rosen on this for very strong language, and it may be worth it to take a minute to explain what this bill does. The first thing it does is it says that going forward, the legislature is not going to be appropriating any funds out of this. The financing mechanism, there's still going to be a board that's going to make recommendations. The legislature will make an up or down recommendation on those items. Second of all, is that it is funded, the Laurentian as well as the Benson communities, because there was a biomass mandate, that those communities have made investments based on this biomass mandate. Those have been removed from the bill. This is in addition in the best interest of the community, but it's also going to save Xcel ratepayers close to $100 million a year. So in addition to saving ratepayers a lot of money, we're going to reduce a lot of pollution. Under current law, what has been happening is we've had turkey litter being trucked up from Alabama to be burned in plants in Minnesota. Now, whether you think that's a good idea or not, I'll leave to you, but certainly that ain't renewable, and sure as heck ain't cleaner or cheaper. The final part of this is that going forward, we're going to make sure that there's a cap on these casks. No one envisioned when this plan was set up in the mid-1990s that we'd have a renewable development fund that grows to $30 million a year in contributions. And so going forward, again, we protect ratepayers to make sure that all the stakeholder concerns are addressed. So I just want to caution members that when you start picking and choosing provisions in this area, it's not everything I wanted, it's not everything that other members wanted, but that is a negotiated agreement that all sides have agreed to. And if you go in and start pulling the cord out of these things, you're not going to be able to fund Laurentian and then leave other provisions alone. So I would just caution members on that. Representative Wagenius would just yield for one more question.
She will yield. Gentleman from Dakota, Chairman Garofalo.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Wagenius, you highlighted the concerns about Representative Baker's local co-op democracy bill. This is a provision that I believe 30% of the House DFL, up to 30% of the House DFL voted for. Your statements in opposition to that, is that as well the DFL's position on that issue?
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
Well, it's very curious that you think I talked about it. I didn't.
The gentleman from Dakota, Chairman Garofalo.
Mr. Speaker, would Representative Wagenius yield?
She will yield. The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Representative Wagenius previously used comments talking about the outsourcing of energy being created in Minnesota, the energy being created for the coal industry in outstates. If you weren't talking about this provision, what provision were you talking about?
The lady from Hennepin, Representative Wagenius.
What I was talking about is the Renewable Energy Fund and the Made in Minnesota. So basically, it's the Renewable Energy Fund that where you have changed the priorities for it, and you're saying a board is going to expend that money. But actually, what's happening in this bill, you're earmarking the dollars. And you're earmarking so many dollars that there really isn't any money left over for doing the renewable energy kinds of things that Minnesotans agreed to back in the mid-1990s. And for you to say that no one envisioned this, these dollars going on for that long, I don't think that's true at all. I don't think you were around. I was around. I never heard anybody saying that these nuclear casks were going to be leaving in 10 or 20 years. That was not the expectation. The worry was that they would be here. And guess what? They not only are here, there is nobody anticipating that they're going to leave anytime soon. So that is why I brought up your choice to reduce the dollar that Excel is paying into the fund because the casts are still here. There's no one anticipating that the casts are leaving.
Gentleman from Dakota, Chairman Garofalo.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Representative Readiness, there's several corrections I have to your comments, but I will leave them go with the exception of one. Keep in mind that Excel doesn't pay anything. The ratepayers of the Excel service territory are the ones who pay this. And so the savings that are in this bill, none of this is returned to Excel shareholders. None of this is returned to the employees of Excel. Every single penny is in the fuel and tax adjustment charge in these bills. Every single penny in the savings is going to go on the bottom line for low income, middle income, high income, and business ratepayers in the state of Minnesota. There is no magic pot of money that belongs to Excel. This negotiated agreement is a win-win. It's good for economic development. It saves a ton of money. It literally reduces tons of pollution. So that's all I'm going to talk about with regards to that. But I do think it's important for members to be aware that there's a negotiated agreement in that area. We are getting different communications from different folks in the DFL coalition. If you're a supporter of this agreement, please reinforce with your colleagues that there is agreement on this matter. Keep in mind the biomass plant in Benson's going to close. There's no dispute over that. It doesn't take any legislative action for it to happen. The debate is over whether we're going to help people or not. Moving on to other provisions in the bill, the Barr, Neuberger, Schumacher language to eliminate regulatory barriers to incentivize energy infrastructure development, not only in the renewable energy industry, but also for power lines and for pipelines is in the bill. Representative Lehman's IRRB reform language is in the bill. Representative Thiessen highlighted earlier the concerns regarding internet privacy. I'm confident we can get these issues addressed by the end of session. Representative O'Neill, I want to thank her for her work with regards to the C-LEAF funds, making sure that we have prioritization of these funds. We have a transparent process so that everybody is competing for these funds in the exact same way, not having a two-track process. I want to congratulate Representative Krisha. The VoIP provisions that are in this bill, now we're just simply clarifying existing law. Last week, a federal court ruled that, in fact, yes, the federal government does, in the areas of voice over IP, does supersede that regulation. So this is a clarification of that existing law. So, Mr. Speaker, members, as we go forward in this process, I want to thank those members on the other side of the aisle who are involved in having your priorities addressed. As we go forward, clearly more of your priorities will need to be addressed for it to become law, but I want to thank members and ask for your support on the adoption of the report.
Discussion. There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the adoption of Senate File 1937. The clerk will close the roll. There being 75 ayes and 52 nays, the committee report is adopted. Third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, Senate File number 1937, as amended by conference.
Third reading. Any further discussion? The gentleman from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the members, earlier I called this a veto missile, and I want to apologize for insulting missiles. This is more of a scud. Not very far to travel and no direction. I will address a couple of things here, but I'll start out by saying that apparently there was a negotiations, but negotiations, when they're finally done, typically come back to the conference committee so the conferees actually hear about them and people get to testify whether they like them or they don't like them. And any negotiations that I was not part of any negotiations on the last subject that we just talked about. I'm going to wrap this up a little bit here and add my comments to it. As you heard Representative Clark, this housing bill doesn't address homework begins at home. One of the most successful programs for homeless youth. And as I said before, as I've said all along, these young people are going to have to be in our economy in order for us to succeed as a state. And unless we take care of those young men and women, we as a state are less. The Commerce Division, and this bill takes 4 different major divisions: Housing, Commerce, Department of Labor and Industry, and Jobs. And in the Commerce Division, we really didn't address financial institutions. And it's going to cost small state-chartered banks more money. We didn't put enough money in for financial investigation to make sure that financial fraud does not happen. And as the baby boomers go, there's going to be more ripeness for fraud. We should and we must address that issue. Representative Readiness talked about the RDF changes. Representative Allen talked about them. There's one thing I can agree with in the RDF changes. That was an agreement that was made 25 years ago, and the technology has changed. We should have had a longer, more in-depth conversation about what technologies the RDF should pursue. We didn't have any conversation about or the ability for them to help with battery storage. I think it's in there now, but only in a kind of a transitional way. I probably said that wrong. I'm not real thrilled with taking the money. We did take the money, and we're making a legislative slush fund at the end of the day. That's not what we should be doing. The Department of Labor and Industry, I think the commissioner sent 4 or 5 letters, and each and every one of them had, don't put the $1,000 limit on building code changes. I'm not sure if I'll get in trouble for this, so I'll clean it up a little bit. But one of the people that is opposed to this essentially said, you can't pass gas in new construction without costing $1,000. It was a little different wording. So what that does is it slows down our code adoption, makes our homes less safe. Our public safety people that have to go into those homes if there's a fire are less safe. If we have to live in them, we are less safe than we could be. The one that's got me upset, I work with my hands all my life. I took a shower when I got home, not before I went to work. I got dirty. I climbed up to the top of towers. I pulled on pipe wrenches. I worked hard for my money, but I gave my employer 8 hours of work for 8 hours worth of pay. And my employer, except for one of them over 30 years, gave me 8 hours worth of pay for 8 hours worth of work. Yet 40,000 people report that they get their wages stolen from them every year. That's only the ones that report. It could be 100,000, it could be even more. And the governor and the commissioner, with the blessing of the governor, in every one of their letters said, we want the full language and we want the full dollars to put more wage theft investigators in the field. If you work for 8 hours, you should get paid for 8 hours worth of work. This bill does not do that. This bill doesn't do that. That's the most offensive thing in the bill to me, amongst many opportunities, I'll phrase it that way. Representative Dabney talked a lot about the workforce development money, and I've had that argument over the last 15 years. We take in $60 million a year from employers because of a special tax. Workforce service areas say it, their association says it, the Department of Employment and Economic Development says they need 30. They need $30 million a year. I don't understand what Representative Garofalo is thinking, but if I'm a business Republican and I see $60 million coming in from a tax on business and they only need $30 million, the obvious choice was to reduce that tax versus funding every other thing they could possibly think of. Because those things should come out of the general fund money, all those other workforce training positions. But worse yet, we leave $20 million. And I said it in conference committee, I think you're going to have to replace the plush pussycat with a copy of the Grinch. Because right at the end of the year, when they run out of money and there's a mass layoff, people won't get any help to get back to work at Christmas time. I think you've kept in the settlement money for the, or the settlement language for the VW, which puts us at risk for losing $47 million. You had three bills that talked about, worked at, addressed the lack of child care in greater Minnesota. Representative Flanagan went around the state with her counterparts on the Republican side, meeting after meeting. There's no money in here to help men and women start child care. It's not an urban issue. It's not just the greater Minnesota issue. It's a young parent's issue. And if you have to add a half an hour or 45 minutes to your day going farther and farther and farther to get your precious children to a place that they can be cared for so you can go to work, that's an hour and a half in a car by the time it's all done. An hour and a half, you're not educating your child, showing your child the values that you hold dear to your heart. Most of the time on the roads today, you're teaching them something that you really shouldn't be teaching them. We've got in here an elimination of certificate of need. When you eliminate the certificate of need in any kind of energy use, what you're doing is cutting out people's voices. How do people get to have their voice heard if there's no meeting about whether you need a windmill or a wind farm, a solar panel or a solar farm, a gas-fired power plant, a nuclear plant, and we're not planning on one of those, or anything else? It's the right thing to do to hear people's voices and make your argument. And your argument should be better so that they will understand that there's a need, and the need is the correct one that you've identified. Broadband. Oh, here we go. $15 million. The governor asked for 60. You know, that's greater Minnesota stuff. I have championed broadband since the inception or the idea of a state-subsidized broadband system. Actually, it's just helping large companies do what they really should do, but they won't. But that $15 million is, I think, less than what we did the last biennium. And it's definitely less than the first time we did it. It's regulating greater Minnesota, where many of your members, Representative Garofalo, come from, to a second-class economy, a second-class education. I'm befuddled. I'm shocked at how people on your side of the aisle allow that. And job creation, which is the first, I think it's the first word in our particular committee. Although we really have an energy committee with a bunch of other words tossed on top of it. But job creation. Members, I want everybody in this chamber to understand we are typically at the kiddie table when it comes to job incentives for companies to come to the state of Minnesota. Representative Fabian, I supported from the moment I heard DigiKey coming and doing a huge expansion. Good for you. You worked that hard. You did what you were supposed to do. You got it in the bill. Yours is the only one that got done. If Benson, we're going to close a turkey burning, poop burning plant, they want to use that money to build a cheese factory, cheese processing factory. Good for them. Come on to the Capitol. I think that's a great idea. That's 300 jobs out in greater Minnesota. That's 300 good-paying jobs with benefits out in western Minnesota. You failed. There was a shrimp farm done earlier. The governor has talked about it 2 or 3 different times, saying that's a good idea. We should talk about that. We should try and figure it out. That's another 300 jobs per harbor. So if you did 2 or 3 or 4, do the multiplication. That's $18, $20 an hour with benefits in greater Minnesota that we should have been able to do without closing down the RDF. I just don't understand when so many people, so many members come from greater Minnesota, why we didn't try to help greater Minnesota create good paying jobs in western Minnesota. When it had support on this side of the aisle, it had support in the governor's office. Governors talked about it again. And the thing that I saw, that I've been working on this kind of talking points for a while. In today's Minneapolis Star-Trib in the business section, employers get creative and hunt for talent. You had to have earplugs in and be deaf, not to hear the business community say, we need well-trained workers, we need a lot of them, we have thousands and thousands of jobs that are going unfulfilled because we don't have the trained workers. Other than Representative Rarick's bill, we heard no other bills about how to do innovative training. We are doing training the same way we've done it for 20 years that I've been here. It is time to change it, and we should have had hearings. Instead, we had 3 out of 4 were on energy. It's a jobs committee too. And if you talk to the businesses in greater Minnesota, urban Minnesota, and the suburbs, they are all desperate for well-trained workers. And we didn't talk about it. Let me make sure I get everything done. I think I've gotten everything. It's a bad bill for housing, doesn't fulfill the needs of commerce, doesn't listen to the governor and the commissioner on Dolly, or Department of Labor and Industry, and it's a jobless jobs bill. Members, there's no reason to take this. We've already delayed negotiations 6 days by this failed attempt to send a message to the governor. We've lost 6 days. We've almost assured ourselves of a special session. And it is bills like this that are making sure that we're going to cost the taxpayers more money because we're going to have to come back here. Members, this bill does not deserve a yes vote. I'll be voting no.
Further discussion? The gentleman from Dakota, Chairman Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Just to be clear, this bill provides additional incentives for career training for those that have in-demand jobs, particularly in rural Minnesota. In addition, it lowers energy prices, it reduces pollution, it makes it easier to invest in energy infrastructure and overall infrastructure in the state of Minnesota, and it lowers the cost of government by reforming government and doing things better. I ask for a green vote.
Further discussion? The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 75 ayes and 54 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, and this is the Nornes motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred in and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 2214. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. The Conference Committee report is addressed to the Honorable Michelle L. Fischbach, President of the Senate, the Honorable Kurt L. Doudt, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferees for Senate File Number 2214, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by 4 of the 5 conferees on the part of the Senate and 4 of the 5 conferees on the part of the House. Nornes moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 2214 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the author, Chairman Nornes, the gentleman from Otter Tail. Members, getting a little loud here.
Mr. Speaker,
Chairman.
That is my motion. I'd like to request a roll call.
Roll call. I'm going to request, are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The gentleman from Otter Tail, Chairman Nornes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The higher education conference report changed very little from the time it left here on the floor of the House. The budget target is now $125 million above the base for a total investment from a general fund of just over $3.2 billion. There was a provision in the original bill. It had to do with automatic admittance to a college if you were in the top 10 of your class. That was removed during the conference committee. There was also some language in the original bill that dealt with some benchmarks that were both for the university and for the Minnesota state system, and that language also was removed. Those were the only changes that occurred, and I stand for questions.
Discussion. The gentleman from Winona, Representative Pulowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. When this bill left the House, it was characterized as a bill that didn't work. It's come back as a bill that's broken. And it's broken, unfortunately, in a number of ways that negatively impact students. First of all, this bill will increase tuition, and it will significantly increase tuition. The University of Minnesota alone projects that it will increase tuition 5% each year on the main campus and probably 2% on its auxiliary campuses. In the MNSCU system, there is an anomaly now that we understand a lot better as a result of this bill. There is a structural imbalance in higher ed. That structural imbalance is causing literally $169 million or more that if this bill were to become law would have to be cut from the campuses of the Min-State system. I can illustrate it with Winona State having to cut $4.6 million. That cut would result in 55 faculty or about 80 staff. That's without considering increasing tuition. So what the bill does is this. At a time when we're desperately short of teachers, it will ensure that teacher programs will be reduced. At a time when we are desperately in need of healthcare professionals, it will ensure that nursing programs will have to be cut. At a time when we desperately need trained employees across the state in almost every occupation, it will ensure that particularly at the 2- and 4-year campuses, we will see cuts in those programs. This bill does not freeze tuition. It freezes it by saying it does and not paying for it. Even if you argue in the bill that somehow you're freezing tuition at the 2 years and lowering it in the second, one better start understanding how MNSCU's budget works, and it works as a whole budget, not in parts. If you don't fund all the parts, it takes from the parts funded to make sure it can do what it has to do in the other parts, so the 4 years pay for the so-called tuition freeze or tuition reduction in the 2-year bill. This bill left as a bill that didn't work. It now comes back as a bill that's broken, and it will break the backs of students with record debt if this becomes law. Student debt now exceeds credit card debt in the country. We are 4th and 5th in the country, the amount of debt students have and in the number of students that carry it. This bill is a broken bill, and it breaks the backs of the students.
Discussion. The clerk will take the roll on the adoption. The clerk will close the roll. There being 75 ayes and 54 nays, the committee report is adopted. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 2214, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Any further discussion? The clerk will take the roll.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 75 ayes and 54 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to. Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen. For what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I and many others wanted to take a few moments to honor and celebrate someone who has been a big part of this body and the work that we've done for many, many years, and has been a really, really great friend to many of us in this chamber, and that's Mike Charboneau, who is with us here today, as he is every day. But we wanted to, we're going to be, first of all, going to be having a small reception, maybe not so small, we'll see, from 4 to 6 up in room 316 in the Capitol. So if you have a chance to break away from the debate and stop by, please do that. But Mr. Speaker, we do have a resolution that if we could run through that. Thank you. Whereas those who maintain the highest standards of excellence in state government perform an important community service deserving of special legislative recognition, and whereas Mike Charboneau has devoted many years of exemplary service to the state of Minnesota as a legislative staff member and employee of the House DFL Caucus, and I'd like to let Mary Murphy speak.
She will yield. Representative Murphy.
Whereas a native of Northeast Minneapolis, Mike attended De La Salle High School and graduated from St. John's University in Collegeville, high above the Sagatagan, where he was a member of the football team. And whereas Mike began working at the Capitol in 1974 as an intern for Representative Bob McCarran, who was his high school teacher and former football coach, and I yield to Representative Lyndon Carlson.
He will yield. Representative Carlson.
Whereas after being recruited by Governor Wendell Anderson's office to serve as a special assistant to the governor, he continued to work for Governor Anderson when he became a senator, traveling the state in a big van known as the Senator Wendell Anderson Constituent Service Mobile Office. And whereas Mike worked in the insurance, banking, and computer industry from 1979 to 1991 when he served as committee administrator during the 77th legislative session. And I would like to yield to Representative Erin Murphy.
She will yield. Representative Murphy.
Thank you. Whereas Mr. Charboneau has been involved with the House DFL Caucus for many years and held numerous positions, including legislative director to the Speaker, executive assistant to the Majority Leader, executive director of the DFL Caucus, and executive director of Caucus Operations, and I yield to Leader Hortman.
She will yield. Representative Hortman.
Whereas it is a proper time to honor his tremendous service to the House of Representatives and the state of Minnesota, and a celebration will be held in his honor on May 15th, 2017. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration of the House of Representatives of the state of Minnesota that it thanks Mike Charboneau for his many years of outstanding service to the state of Minnesota and congratulates him on his retirement. Members, if you'll join me in recognizing Mike Charboneau.
Representative Hortman.
Mr. Speaker, so members should know that Mr. Charboneau asked me to please not do anything, but he didn't tell me that I couldn't delegate it. So I delegated the recognition to Representative Thiessen and former Speaker Margaret Anderson Kelleher, and that was a recognition that was very well deserved.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just, I know we've already done the applause and everything, so thank you for that. But I do just want to say, you know, I worked for, or Mike and I worked together for 6 years when he was, as in leadership, worked with Margaret for 4. And just a couple quick things. First, he's worked for leadership staff in the House for over 20 years through at least 6 different leaders, which is, when you think about that, is a pretty remarkable thing, and says a lot about who Mike is as a person and the advice that he's willing to give and is able to give, which is always very sound. And I think on both sides of the aisle, people understand that he's straightforward and is going to shoot straight. Doesn't always, you know, says a lot of words sometimes, doesn't always know what he means by it. But I think, I do think that he really has set the standard in the legislature for what we've come to expect and what we should expect from a great public servant. And I just want to say, you know, how much it's meant to work so closely with you for so long. You know, we're really going to, I personally, we all are, this institution really is going to miss you. Thank you.
Members, I want to take an opportunity to recognize a former member in the chamber. Her name was mentioned, but please join me in welcoming Margaret Anderson Kelleher, who served from 1999 to 2011 and served as Speaker of the House from 2007 to 2011. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate, and this is the Cornish motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred in and adopted the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 803, an act relating to public safety. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate. The Conference Committee report is addressed to the Honorable Michelle L. Fischbach, President of the Senate, and the Honorable Kurt L. Doudt, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferees for Senate File Number 803, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The Conference Committee report is signed by 4 of the 5 conferees on behalf of the Senate and 4 of the 5 conferees on the part of the House. Cornish moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File Number 803 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
I recognize the member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish, who will explain the report.
Mr. Speaker and members, this is my motion to Senate File 803 Conference Committee report adoption. Mr. Speaker and members, Mr. Speaker, if I could first of all ask for a roll call vote. I'll wait.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, I've got a short summary here of the bill and then ready to get into it as deep as you would like. The change item highlights the Conference Committee report doesn't include the 1% year compensation increases across the judiciary and agencies that the original House bill funded. Also not included is Representative Grossel's bill that enhanced supervision and penalties for certain criminal sexual conduct and child pornography crimes, which was funded at $5.8 million in the House bill. The conference report includes $13 million for the biennium for police training, a reduction of $1 million from the House portion. This amount sunsets after the fiscal year 2021 biennium in the conference report. Several items from the Senate and/or requests from the governor weren't included that were were included that were not in the original House bill. They include a little over $1 million for mandated services deficit at district courts, $750,000 for Roseau County disaster reimbursement, $2.3 million for critical technology modernization at the Department of Corrections, $922,000 to the Community Justice Account, which was created in last year's bill on drug sentencing reform, $8.865 million to reduce court filing fees. Several provisions from the original House bill did not make it out of the conference committee. The list is a little lengthy here. Representative Johnson's bill requiring legislative approval for modifications to sentencing guidelines. My bill for increasing penalties and requiring registration for certain predatory offenses. Representative Heinzman's bill on enhanced penalties for multiple driving without license offenses. Representative Zerwas' bill that dealt with segregation guidelines in state correctional institution. Representative Lunen's provision with the gas pump skimming crimes, Representative Clark's bill regarding geographic boundary restrictions by court order, Representative Frankie's provision establishing a new state terrorism crime, Representative Grossel's enhanced penalties for assaulting medical personnel in hospitals, Representative Becker-Finn's proposal to develop domestic violence prevention program in the DOC, Representative Grossel's criminal sexual conduct bill stays prohibited and enhanced supervision penalties for certain crimes, Representative Lesch's electronic monitoring bill project, pilot project extension for domestic abusers, Representative Erdahl's bill that makes utility co-op eligible for state disaster assistance money, and then my bill from the DWI task force bill that reflects the U.S. and Minnesota Supreme Court decisions related to implied consent and blood and urine warrants. That's it for the summary, and I'll stand for questions.
Discussion to the adoption of the conference committee. Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The first day of the Public Safety Conference Committee, we met, and the Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court, in an unprecedented fashion, testified before the conference committee, and I quote, "The judiciary is not a mere state agency. The judiciary is a branch of government, and it deserves to be funded as such. A vibrant judiciary is essential to a well-functioning democracy. The courts are vital to government's basic function of protecting public safety, ensuring individuals' rights, and providing a forum for the orderly and civil resolution of disputes. When everything else breaks down, the courts are where the people come, and they come seeking justice." After the conference committee's agreement was released, Justice Gilday issued the following statement in response. "The legislature's failure to prioritize public safety and the justice system in this critical budget setting process is deeply troubling. The conference committee proposal, if passed into law, would have significant consequences for Minnesota's justice system. This proposed budget would leave our district courts without enough judges to manage a rising caseload in an effective and timely manner. It would jeopardize our state's drug courts, DWI courts, and veterans courts, which are effective tools for combating the rise of substance abuse in our state. It would put the constitutional rights of Minnesotans at risk by harming our ability to find qualified court interpreters or pay for psychological examinations of court participants. It would put the private and sensitive data of Minnesotans at risk by not allowing our courts to implement needed cybersecurity improvements. House and Senate leaders have called their budget advancing the Minnesota way. Jeopardizing public safety and access to justice is not the Minnesota way. Funding our justice system has long been a bipartisan priority in Minnesota, and especially given the state's current fiscal stability, it must remain a priority." Then she goes on and says, "On behalf of Minnesota's judicial branch and the people of Minnesota, I urge the legislature to work with the governor on a budget plan that preserves a high-functioning justice system in Minnesota. So what is in the bill or not in the bill that would cause this unprecedented statement? Without enough judges to manage caseloads in an effective and timely manner. Well, this bill adds 2 judges, but the seatbelt gag rule repeal costs more than 1 judge unit. The governor's budget proposal fully funded the MJB request for 2 new justices. That is not in the bill. The conference committee agreement provides funding for those 2 judgeships, but again, once you pay for the amount of cost for repealing the seatbelt gag rule, the 2 judges are not placed where the majority of cases, based on that new law, would be. You actually end up doing more harm than good. It jeopardizes state drug courts, DWI courts, veterans courts, which are an effective tool for combating substance abuse in our state. So why would that be the case? It does not fund the court's request to fully fund an ongoing system. The governor proposed the budget that fully funded the Minnesota Judicial Branch's request of $1.7 million a year. That's not in the bill, merely $100,000 is. It puts the constitutional rights of Minnesotans at risk by harming the ability to find qualified court reporters and pay for these exams. And what else? It cuts between 40 and 50 public defenders. When this bill left this body, it had a 1% increase for salaries. The House and Senate compromise position went halfway between the Senate's very low-funded bill and the House's, thereby actually eliminating that funding, resulting in this being a cut bill. It cuts public defenders. The guardian ad litem program would be negatively impacted, court reporters, court interpreters. And then there's just the judge compensation as well. They had requested 3.5% increase per year. There is none at all. So then let's go to the Department of Public Safety. This body continues to talk about public safety as a priority, but there is nothing safe about this bill. This bill would result in 180 staff positions being cut or going unfilled based on the cost of the salary increases that's already in the bill. They'd either have to do that by layoffs or by unfilled positions remaining vacant. This bill does not fund the predatory offender registration system. There's been much talk this session about how important it is to not have secret sex offenders and for the public to know where it is that sex offenders are and so that they can be tracked. That's not funded in this bill at all. Then there's a lack of funding in the AGED program, which jeopardizes our ability to re-inspect the very breweries and distilleries that we just talked about in Representative Hoppy's bill. That's not funded in this bill. Then we talk about the operational funding that was not included. So that's drug chemistry, firearms examinations, the BCA investigators. So members, what happens is by not funding those requirements, Minnesota will have to choose what it is that we will be most effective at. The state government finance bill isn't even talked about besides in this bill, but that has additional cuts in that bill in this area as well. The Department of Corrections officers will see between 200 and 250 officers laid off based on this bill alone. And when you add that to Representative Anderson's bill, that would be another 199 corrections officers. So that's between 400 and 450 layoffs in the Department of Corrections. We lost the amendment that would have funded some of our CAT teams and safeties out of the railroad funds. So this bill ends up being a windfall for railroads. There's no money for disaster relief account and the firefighter issues. We take it out of the firefighters account. So members, again, at this point, there is nothing safe about this public safety bill, and I would encourage you to vote no.
The member from Washington, Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, there is a chart coming around now that will point out something that I think will be very helpful. Youth intervention programs have been around for 30, 40 years, but most counties have had to cut them because their funding isn't adequate. The state has not continued to support funding for youth intervention programs. In this committee, we've talked a lot about prison population. We've talked about prison reform. We've talked a lot about punishment and rehabilitation. We talk about reforming people. Most of us are old enough to remember reform schools. And that was about turning kids around. What youth intervention programs do is intervene at an early point before kids get into big trouble. And even if they get into big trouble, the youth intervention programs are there to help them. I want to read something to you. My name is Amanda. I'm in the 11th grade, and I live on the west side. I believe youth intervention programming is very important to our community because it helps kids break the cycle of poverty and other recurring societal issues. The West Side is strong, and I think a big part of that is the essential youth programming that's available. The biggest impact youth programming has had on me is that it's connected me more to the community and helped me find mentors that I otherwise would not have. So if you'll look at that chart, I think most of you have them now, you'll see that costs for incarceration have gone up and up and up, and the state has been funding these. On the other hand, funding for the youth intervention programs has been relatively flat. It costs a lot more to take care of people in prison and to help adults overcome the addictions and the criminal thinking, all of the behaviors that they have long established. Youth intervention programs, on the other hand, are much less expensive and far more effective at turning people into productive adults. Youth intervention works with youth that are living in trauma and helps them become productive adults. Youth intervention programs should be considered an essential service that the state provides, since we pay higher costs to let them become adult consumers of public services. Public safety is jeopardized when we ignore youth we know are at risk of entering the justice system. Only 5% of the estimated 300,000 youth at risk are touched by the youth intervention grants. We need to spend billions on youth instead of billions on adults needing intervention. Thank you.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I voted for this when it left the floor. I will be a no vote today. First of all, I think we have to support the judiciary, and I don't believe that the Chief Justice is being dramatic or hysterical. I think there's a real problem there with what hasn't happened. But I'm also kind of surprised to find the driver's license stuff in here. That is not a bill that we even heard in public safety. And so how it got back in here, I'm a bit troubled by. Chair Cornish has been at events with me when I have talked about the Public Safety Committee and how it is traditionally been nonpartisan and one of the great committees to work on. But having this snuck in, I just can't vote for that or go along with that kind of a procedure. So I'm a no vote. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Dean R.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The bill that came back was as bad as the bill that left. There are many provisions in here that, although the argument is made about them being for public safety, there clearly seems to be a mean-spirited part of this bill. The protests provisions around nuisance, which changes the penalties from misdemeanors to gross misdemeanors. If your intent is not to sort of increase our prison population, something that we've worked drastically on the past several years, then clearly your intent is that you want to quelch speech and you want those people that go out into the freeways, that disrupt everyday people's lives, people whose lives have been disrupted by the structure of the system that we've put in place over these decades, then I think you succeed in that. Because clearly, this is not about trying to make people's lives better or not about trying to make people's lives safer. The provision around the private prison requiring the Commissioner or Department of Corrections to do a study on the value. Again, you're trying to increase prison beds. You're trying to make it virtually impossible for there not to be a situation that we ask the Department of Corrections to deal with, and then we add this provision on it. And then I want to speak lastly about Real ID, because this actually freezes the existing rules in a statute, a provision that currently is making it not possible for us to pass Real ID. Real ID would pass out of here tomorrow if it was just left to be the way it is, that there are existing rules that the governor has said he would not change, that would allow us to implement Real ID. It would pass out of here tomorrow. I bet it even passed today if there was a suspension of rules put forward. But you're choosing to put this in place because you think it somehow makes people in the state of Minnesota safer. I don't know how having people not take driver's license tests, having people not get driver's insurance makes anybody safer. And if anything, I think that this might even be tied back into private prisons. Lo and behold, the #1 occupier of prison beds across the United States is ICE, Department of Immigration and Customs. They're the individuals that are putting undocumented people that quite frankly whose only crime might be to come back into this country after they were deported once. These are people that are contributing taxes. These are people that are contributing Social Security. These are people that are working hard every day to make better lives for their families. No different than what all of us do in Minnesota. So I think this bill is actually somewhat perverted because I think it twists things to make it seem like we're trying to make things safer for the people of Minnesota. And that's a great face you're making at me, Majority Leader. That's so wonderful to see that. I just want to reiterate, there's really nothing safe about this public safety bill, and I would hope that we would not accept it.
The member from Dakota, Representative May Quaid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, I joined, some of my colleagues who were a yes when this bill left the floor, and today just a no. And there's a lot of reasons, and there's two I want to talk about. The first one is the protest piece that Representative Dean talked about. Protest is the act of telling the truth in public. And sometimes we use our bodies to tell the truth. That was true when union workers did it, when women did it for the right to vote, in the 60s, when people of color did it for the right to vote, when my father-in-law did it with his tractor right up to this Capitol. We use our bodies to tell the truth in public. And the truth is, sometimes we need to disrupt the normalcy of everyday life to bring people's attention to the injustice and inequity that seem to fly by the faces of too many, but is felt very deeply by too many Minnesotans. And instead of responding to that truth we're telling with our bodies, with policies and constructive conversations, let's just punish them more. We don't want to hear about it. Let's underfund our schools. Let's cut transportation by 40%. Let's not make raises for the PCAs. Let's not fund vocational rehabilitation services. But when people want to tell us the truth about what that does to their community, let's punish them more. We don't want to hear the truth. It hurts. It's hard. We don't want to do anything about it. And the second thing I want to talk about is the Department of Corrections workers and private prisons, private for-profit prisons. Companies should not be making profits off of the incarcerations of Minnesotans. Our goal should be to reduce the number of people who are incarcerated through training, treatment, whatever it is that we need to do to make sure that we restore the freedom to Minnesotans, that we intervene so that our public is safe and people can reintegrate into the community. Not give the opportunity for a company to come in and make money off of the incarceration of people. And what happens when a company starts making money? They want to keep making more money. There is so much motivation to retain and grow that profit. That we should not be doing this. We should be working to reduce the number of people incarcerated, not increase it, and for certain, not make sure that there's a company making money off of it. So I am a no on this bill for so many reasons, but those two in particular. And I hope that many of you will join me in that no, because we can do better for Minnesotans. We can do better for our communities. We can do better for public safety. As it's been said, this bill is not about public safety. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Becker-Finn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to take this opportunity to refresh everyone's memories about a few things. First, I want to take us back to December of last year. Many of you will remember the Star Tribune ran a series about solitary confinement in our prison system. And myself, and I think nearly everyone who read that series, agreed that something needed to be done, especially when dealing with those with mental illness. And Representative Zerwas has a bill that would address some of those concerns. And it's a good bill. It's a bipartisan bill. We heard really compelling testimony in committee in support of making some of these changes. And unfortunately, there's no language and no funding in this bill now before us to deal with that crisis. And so I really think that this bill fails in that regard. There are actual people who will be affected by our failure to act when it comes to addressing solitary confinement in our prison system. And our failure to act this year is going to be more people are negatively affected by that. Second, you will probably remember just a week or two ago we passed Representative Krisha's bill, McKenna's Law, that would require that children in our child protection system be notified of their right to a public defender. And rightly, we all voted for that bill. It passed the House and the Senate unanimously. Unfortunately, here's the catch. I bet you didn't see this one coming. The public safety bill underfunds the public defenders by a lot. If this were to become law, it's estimated that 40 to 50 public defenders would be laid off. So now we have more kids being told of their right to a public defender, but there won't be enough public defenders to actually represent them and give them the services that they deserve and have a right to. And the public defender caseloads, which are already really high, will be even higher. And the attention that cases like McKenna's should have, it's not going to be there. There will be more people trying to access a system with even fewer resources and fewer attorneys. And on that same theme, this bill also expands legal aid eligibility for farmers, which is great. I support that. I think that expanding that for farmers is something that most of us supported. But unfortunately, there's another catch. Again, not surprising, this bill underfunds legal aid. So again, there will be more people rightfully seeking legal assistance, and legal aid programs will have to turn even more people away. They simply don't and won't have the staff and resources to provide those services to people who need them. As things stand right now, even before expanding the eligibility for farmers, only two of 5 people who qualify for legal aid currently receive services. 2 out of 5, so less than half of the people who qualify for legal aid are actually getting those services because things are so underfunded in that area. And adding even more people to that pool is just going to exacerbate the problem. Finally, ostensibly, we all want a fair justice system, but that requires funding. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why in this time of surplus, we aren't properly funding public safety. The Republican majority has chosen to put the priority at bailouts for health insurance companies and relief for wealthy Minnesotans with large estates above public safety. And no part of our justice system is safe this year with this proposed budget. Again, we can call this a public safety bill, but it's not making more Minnesotans safe. Please vote no.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, members, this is one of the last of the majority's omnibus bills that we're considering. And I think it's really critical to look at these bills not in isolation, but as part of a complete package, because they really represent a statement of the Republican majority's priorities. And what have we seen in those priorities? Well, on the one side, you've got tax cut for a handful of the wealthiest estates in each of our districts, literally a handful, and a property tax cut that disproportionately benefits out-of-state owners of skyscrapers and big box retail stores. That's on the one side. On the other side, the Republican majority has, we know from our discussions on past bills, not prioritized our K-12 students. The basic education funding they're receiving, our districts receive, will not even keep up with inflation and per pupil growth. Once again, a round of cuts in our schools coming up at a time of surplus. They're not prioritizing our college students, underfunding higher education, raising tuition. The result will be cutting services. In the words of Representative Pulowski, threatening our state's ability to meet the future workforce needs of our state. That's not a priority. Our precious natural resources, well, they're in for a $100 million cut in that bill. That's not a priority. Workers who've lost their jobs, we heard from Representative Davney earlier talking about the dislocated worker program, $20 million cut for that program to fund those other priorities. And our most vulnerable Minnesotans, nearly $500 million cut in services to the most vulnerable Minnesotans in our health and human services budget. Now, one would think all those priorities, okay, but the Republican majority would, of course, prioritize public safety, right? Well, let's consider, as was discussed earlier, 400 to 450, nearly 500 employees being laid off from the Department of Corrections. What does the Department of Corrections do? They run our prisons. They run our prisons. And these are people who, when people get out of prison, these are people who are supervising them. And the staff supporting that, the Department of Corrections, nearly 500 people being laid off. You know, the deficit, by the way, for the Department of Corrections, $50 to $55 million, more than the operating budget for an entire prison. They'd have to shut the prison to meet that up, to meet that need. As was referenced by Representative Becker-Finn, public defenders, more than 40 public defenders laid off when our public defenders are already overloaded with their caseloads. Now, please, take it from a prosecutor. Public defenders are critical to public safety, not just people's rights, which of course is critical there, but actually critical to the efficient administration of justice, having people feel that they've been treated fairly, critical to public safety. 180 Department of Public Services, public safety, employees laid off, or position underfunded. Underfunding of the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, slowing down our processing of evidence in cases. And then finally, as was referenced, Chief Justice Gilday, describing as deeply troubling, get this, our Chief Justice, the failure to prioritize public safety in the criminal justice system, pointing out that there won't be enough judges to manage a rising caseload in an effective and timely manner, jeopardizing our state's drug courts, DWI courts, and veterans courts, members, and putting the constitutional rights of Minnesotans at risk. This is what our Chief Justice has pointed out to us. And actually, I'm sorry, I should have added just one more important point. Failing to replenish the disaster contingency account. Well, based on the majority's omnibus bills that have gone through so far, I think we're going to need that disaster contingency account, because there have been a lot of disasters coming all the way through. Members, it has now been just about 7 days since the majority chose to cut off negotiations and send this series of bills to a certain veto. It's just about the same amount of time that we have left, just over 7 days, about the halfway mark from when you cut off negotiations to when we need to be out of here. Every hour we spend on one of these veto missiles that is guaranteed to be vetoed is one less hour that we have to reach a successful conclusion for Minnesotans by the end of the day on May 22nd. So instead of an education bill that's going to get us less education, a higher ed bill that's going to get us higher debt and less higher education, instead of a public safety bill that's going to make us less safe, let's vote this bill down, vote these bills down, and let's get negotiations going to get a satisfactory end to the session that works for Minnesotans. Vote no.
There being no further discussion, a roll call being requested, the clerk will take the roll on the motion to adopt the conference committee report on Senate File 803. Clerk will close the roll. There being 73 ayes and 55 nays, the motion prevails on the adoption of Senate File 803. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File number 803, as amended by conference.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Member from Blue Earth, Representative Cornish.
Mr. Speaker and members, just some short comments here. First of all, Representative Hillstrom, I don't think it was unprecedented for comments, maybe for testimony, but there's been a former Chief Justice that has been pretty aware of budgets before and spoke out, and that's their right. And in your previous chairperson of our Public Safety Committee, I'm sure that you didn't satisfy everyone, and I think I can remember some critical letters of your budget floating across the desk before. So, and I know it's the previous chair's job to get up and cut into the present chair on the bill, so no hard feelings there. Representative Ward, we've been very beneficial to Youth Intervention Program. We've doubled their budget plus, and I think they'll be just fine. Representative Considine, the driver's license, I don't know how that's partisan, unless you folks have made somehow a partisan issue out of this. They people can't get driver's license now by a certain procedure, and we just thought that should be the legislators' duty instead of a bunch of unelected bureaucrats making that decision. Representative Dean, you're out of touch with the most of the Minnesota people if you think that people don't want protesters off the highways and transit and airports. Multiple surveys have shown that that's a very popular subject, is cutting down on that type of activity and increasing the penalties, which, by the way, we didn't do very much. And then the study on the prison, a watered-down thing that they just have to do a study on the prison. Why in the world wouldn't you want to do a study on the prison? And then the old story about making profit of a private prison. It's not going to be a private prison. The recommendation is to run by the DOC with state workers. And if actually, it's going to be on the DFL's head if that thing turns into a big prison for all these people that are these increased sentence possibilities. You could have bought it or leased it, but you don't want to do either one. You just want to let it sit there, and pretty soon the feds will own it and pack it full of prisoners, and maybe it will be private. But I think that's going to be in your head. Let's see here. So I think I had one other note here. Layoffs. Every chair that I've ever been on, or every committee that I've been on now in 15 years, we've gotten threats for layoffs. The world's going to end. State parks will be closed. Wayside rests will be closed. Every possible threat you can imagine. We didn't cut off negotiations, by the way. What we did is ended a stall out that was probably going to take us into special session. When you end up sitting in a room going line by line by line, pretty soon you get a pretty clear picture in your head of what's going on. And so I would just encourage the people out there in Minnesota, the world isn't going to end. Don't retreat into your caves with your bottled water and dehydrated food. Life will go on with this bill, just like it has in the past. Everything's going to be okay. Vote green.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the conference report. Clerk will close the roll. There being 75 ayes, 54 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate file herewith transmitted. Senate file number 1564. The message is signed Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading, Senate file number 1564, an act relating to transportation. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Pepin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Wednesday, May 17, 2017, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills: House File number 575 and 1227.
If there is no objection, we'll revert to standing reports from standing committees.
Copy of this order of business is placed on page 2.
Copy of this order of business is placed on each member's desk. If there is no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of Senate files. House files.
Second reading, House File number 238.
House File 238. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there are no objections, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, motions prevail. Announcements. Member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Earlier today, we laid a bill on the table. How would that get back in front of us to vote on it?
Representative Considine, that would require a motion to take it from the table.
I'm unfamiliar with some of this stuff. Here on the floor? Or?
Representative Considine, yes.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is last week we voted on a bill that was never taken off the floor, and yet it showed up here on the floor. We ended up voting on it. So it would have to have a motion here on the floor to take it off the table prior to being voted on. Just checking the procedures. Thank you.
Representative Considine, that is correct. Further announcements. The Minority Leader, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Just a reminder that we're having a reception for Mike Charboneau's retirement. We did as good of a job as we could of keeping that a secret until today, but please join us in room 316 of the Capitol to help us send Mike off with our best wishes. He's not done yet, of course. He's staying through the end of session, but please join us in room 316 of the Capitol for refreshments.
The member from Polk, Representative Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, tomorrow at 9 o'clock, between 9 and 10, we are going to meet on a discussion about manufactured housing. And if you were interested at all, I would remind you to join us. We'll be in the Senate office building on room 3404, 3404, and invite anyone to join us. Thank you.
Further announcements. Member from Hennepin, Majority Leader Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 16th, 2017.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 16th, 2017. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails. Representative Pepin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 16th, 2017.